You know that feeling, right? When you're putting in the extra hours, maybe extra sets, just extra everything,
Yeah.
trying to get to that next level, but it kind of feels like you're just spinning your wheels.
Oh, definitely.
Whether it's running or landing a trick or even just progress in the gym, that urge to just do more,
Mm,
it's really strong.
it is, yeah. And it's so deeply ingrained, isn't it? How
Yeah.
we think about getting better at things.
Mm.
But when we're talking about young athletes specifically, that same instinct to just pile on the workload, it can actually, well, dig them into a hole sometimes.
Right.
It can hinder their development long term and honestly just suck the fun out of it all.
Right. And that's really the heart of what we're diving into today. We've been looking at the IYCA blog, the International Youth Coaching Association,
Hmm.
specifically their article, Train Smart, Not Hard. And it pulls together a lot of, well, pretty compelling research and these established ideas about how young athletes actually flourish.
Yeah. So our goal really for this
Yeah.
deep dive is to get past that surface idea of more is always better
Okay.
and to really understand why it can be so counterproductive, especially for kids and teens.
Mhm.
We want to, shine a light on the potential pitfalls,
Yeah.
but more importantly, map out a smarter way, a
Mhm.
more effective path that really supports their growth, their well-being, and hopefully keeps that passion for their sport alive.
Okay, so let's tackle that more is better idea head on. It feels like common sense almost, doesn't it?
It does.
Want to improve? Just train more, get stronger, lift heavier, lift more often. Simple. But the article immediately kind of throws the curveball.
Right.
It reminds us that young athletes are not just miniature adults. Why is that distinction so absolutely critical here?
Oh, it's fundamental because, their bodies, their minds,
Yeah.
they're literally still under construction.
Huh.
They're going through rapid physical growth, growth spurts. Their brains are still developing complex cognitive skills.
Yeah.
Their emotional maturity is, well, it's evolving. And on top of all that, there are these specific periods, sometimes called windows of trainability,
Okay.
where they're particularly receptive to developing certain skills, speed,
Yeah.
coordination, things like that.
Mm.
If we just ignore all these developmental realities and just, overload them with volume,
Yeah.
we can accidentally slam those windows shut
Oh.
or even cause actual harm.
And one of the clearest ways this seems to backfire is burnout. The article mentions some research, Gustafson and colleagues, I think, from 2011,
Mhm.
linking that excessive training, especially without enough recovery, to this sort of negative trio, emotional exhaustion.
Yeah.
I feel like you've just stalled out, no progress.
No. Reduced sense of accomplishment.
Yeah, and even starting to dislike the sport you used to love. That sounds like a really heavy price to pay for just doing more.
It absolutely is.
Yeah.
When that training becomes this relentless grind, without enough rest, without
Yeah.
that psychological recovery, these young athletes can just feel completely depleted. And that spark, the thing that got them excited in the first place, it can just get, well, extinguished, replaced by just feeling obligated, maybe even resentful. It's a huge risk to their long-term engagement.
And then there's the injury side. That statistic was really sobering.
Yeah, the Gianti study.
Right, 2015. It found a 70% higher risk of significant overuse injuries in young athletes who specialized early and trained more hours per week than their age. 70.
It's staggering, isn't it?
It really puts the cost of more is better into perspective.
Absolutely. Their growing bodies are they're more vulnerable. The repetitive stress from high volume, highly specialized training, their bones, tendons, ligaments are still maturing.
Right.
Without enough variety, without adequate recovery, those tissues just get overloaded. And that leads to injuries that can sideline them for a long time
Yeah.
and potentially have lasting effects on, their ability to participate down the road. Imagine like a team of 10 kids. That study suggests in a train harder environment,
Yeah.
7 of them are way more likely to get seriously hurt. That's a risk I think a lot of parents, maybe even some coaches, don't fully grasp.
And interestingly, the article also points out that just piling on more hours doesn't even guarantee you'll get better at the skills.
No.
It talks about skill plateaus, how they can happen when you just do the same thing over and over without variation and without enough rest mentally and physically.
Exactly.
It even mentions Erickson's work on deliberate practice from 93, reminding us it's not just the quantity, but the quality.
Precisely. Skill learning isn't just robotic repetition. It needs active thinking, right? Time for the brain to actually process and consolidate new patterns.
Okay.
And enough variety in training so you can adapt to different situations, different challenges.
Yeah.
If kids are just doing the same drills endlessly without that mental break, without facing diverse scenarios, they're going to hit a wall.
Makes sense.
And especially in like open skill sports.
Mhm.
Think soccer, basketball.
Yeah.
That lack of varied experience can really cap their creativity, their ability to make smart decisions when the game is unpredictable.
And something else that really struck me was this idea of losing the joy, just the fun of playing.
Yeah, that's huge.
The article brings in Ryan and DC's self-determination theory, about needing to feel autonomous, competent, and connected.
The core psychological needs.
Right. And it sounds like overtraining just completely undermines all three of those.
It really can. When training feels excessive, when it feels forced on them rather than something they choose, that hits their sense of autonomy.
Okay.
When they're constantly tired, not seeing progress, feeling like they're failing, that undermines their feeling of competence.
Right.
And when the pressure and lack of fun leads them to pull back socially, maybe from teammates, that has relatedness. Their intrinsic motivation just tanks. Youth sports should be fun, engaging, but overtraining can turn it into this joyless chore.
Which, tragically can lead to kids just dropping out altogether.
Yeah.
The Aspen Institute's Project Play numbers are stark. Nearly 70% of kids quitting organized sports by age 13.
It's alarming.
And the article highlights that overtraining and just not having fun anymore are big preventable reasons why. That's a massive loss, not just for their athletic future, but for everything else sports teach you.
It is a major concern. Sports offers so much more than just physical fitness, right? Teamwork, discipline, resilience.
Totally.
When kids get pushed out because of negative stuff like overtraining, they miss out on those crucial life skills, those developmental opportunities.
So if pushing harder often leads down this path of burnout, injury, dropout, what's the alternative? What are these frameworks that offer a better way?
Oh, yeah, exactly. So instead of asking, how much more time can I possibly squeeze in?
Right.
The article suggests a much better question. How can I make the time I do have more effective?
Okay.
And then that leads us to these smarter frameworks it talks about, LTAD and ADM.
LTAD and ADM. Okay, break those down for us. What are they fundamentally about?
Sure. So LTAD stands for long-term athlete development. It's a model used widely, included by the IYCA folks whose article we're discussing.
Got it.
And ADM is the American Development Model, which comes from the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic Committee. They're basically complementary blueprints, roadmaps for guiding how athletes develop over time.
Okay, roadmaps. I like that.
Yeah, and they both represent this really fundamental shift away from just focusing on winning the next game, short-term results.
Yeah.
And towards a much more holistic, age-appropriate, skill-focused approach, thinking long-term.
And what are the core ideas, the principles that both of these models share?
Well, they have several key things in common. First, they both recognize these sensitive periods for development.
Windows.
Exactly. Windows of trainability in LTAD or developmental stages in ADM. Times when kids are just more responsive to specific kinds of training like speed or skill acquisition.
Okay.
Both also really emphasize physical literacy as the foundation, just building a wide range of basic movement skills.
Makes sense.
And critically, both strongly encourage, or in ADM's case, practically require kids to play multiple sports, especially when they're younger.
Avoiding that early specialization trap we talked about.
Precisely. Plus, they both advocate for periodized training, stage-based training, basically varying the volume and intensity strategically over time.
Right.
And ultimately, the goal for both is long-term. Optimal development for the athlete, keeping them active, engaged, developing at every level, hopefully for life. It's about developing the athlete, not just chasing stats or wins right now.
Okay, so it's about thinking in phases, matching the training to where the kid is developmentally, instead of just turning the volume knob up constantly.
Exactly.
And that brings us to periodization. You mentioned it. It sounds kind of complex, maybe something only elite athletes need. But the article says it's relevant for young athletes, too.
Yeah, that's a common misconception. But really, at its heart, periodization is just a structured way to plan training. It involves planned cycles of stress, harder work, and recovery.
Right.
Think of it like waves, periods of higher intensity or volume, followed by periods of lower intensity to let the body adapt, recover, and actually get stronger.
Right, the adaptation happens during recovery.
Exactly. And research, like Isheron's work back in 2010, consistently shows this cyclical approach works best for optimizing performance and preventing overtraining. And the basic principles, they absolutely apply to youth sports.
Okay, so how would a youth coach actually do periodization? Like practically week to week or season to season?
Well, the article gives some good examples.
Sure.
On a weekly level that's called a microcycle, a coach might maybe alternate harder training days, focusing on skill or intensity,
Uh,
with easier days that emphasize recovery, maybe some fun games, lower intensity stuff.
got it.
Then, over maybe a month, a mesocycle. The focus might shift. Maybe one block focuses on building speed, the next on developing strength or coordination.
Ah, focusing on specific qualities.
Right. And then looking at the whole season, the macro cycle, you'd structure the plan around the different phases,
Mm.
off-season, preseason, the actual competition period, and crucially planned rest periods.
Mm.
This kind of planning, this thoughtfulness, it really helps prevent that burnout and those overuse injuries we talked about. Plus, it actually optimizes skill learning and builds more resilient athletes in the long run.
That makes so much sense. It's about being strategic, not just filling time. Okay, so the article then gets pretty specific with recommended weekly practice volumes based on age. Let's start young. Elementary school, say ages 6 to 11. What's the advice there?
Yeah, for that age group, the big focus, according to both LTAD's fundamental stage and ADM's Discover, Learn, and Play, it's all about building that broad base of movement skills
Okay.
through lots of different games, diverse activities, fun stuff. The recommended volume is generally around 6 to 8 hours per week.
6 to 8 hours.
And the key coaching strategies, keep sessions pretty short, maybe 45, 60 minutes, keep them fun.
Right, fundamentals.
Exactly. Encourage trying different sports, different movements. Make skill drills playful, like games. The goal here is really fostering that love of movement, building a wide skill vocabulary. It's not about intense, specialized training yet.
So lots of variety, keep it fun, build the base. Got it. Then middle school, ages roughly 12 to 14, the article calls this learning to train or develop and challenge and bumps the volume up slightly to 8-10 hours a week.
Exactly. So here, while you still want to keep it engaging and enjoyable, you can start introducing a bit more structure, teaching more sport-specific skills or skills that transfer between sports.
Okay.
You can also begin introducing basic strength, speed, coordination work. But, and this is important, you still need to make sure there's plenty of room for their cognitive growth, social life, emotional development.
Talents.
Balance is key. Integrating some game-based learning, maybe some light competition is fine. But a big coaching focus should be on teaching them about recovery, helping them reflect on their training, building resilience when things get tough.
Mm.
And it's a really critical time for coaches to model how to handle emotions, challenges.
That's a great point. Becoming more focused, but still very much about the whole person. Okay, then high school years, 15 to 18, training to compete or train and compete. Volume increases again, 10 to 14 hours per week recommended.
Right. So by this stage, the training naturally gets more specialized, refining those sport-specific skills, learning advanced strategies, following a proper periodized plan that integrates strength and conditioning with sport practice becomes really important.
Oh, okay.
But even with this higher volume, you still have to balance it with school, stress, life outside of sport. That balance never goes away.
Yeah.
And coaches should be encouraging self-regulation now, leadership, giving athletes more ownership over their training. But the article makes a really crucial point here.
What's that?
It cautions against that relentless grind culture.
Yeah.
It emphasizes precision, quality, adequate rest, and training with purpose, not just accumulating hours for the sake of it.
That's such a powerful reminder. Just because they're older doesn't mean you just push them harder without thinking. Okay, so within these time frames, the article also gives some really practical, smarter coaching strategies. The first one, prioritize intent over time. What does that look like on the ground in a session?
It's really about shifting the focus, right?
Yeah.
Away from just filling the hour towards making sure every minute has a clear purpose.
Quality over quantity again.
Exactly. It's that idea that one really focused, technically sound rep is way more valuable than 10 sloppy, mindless ones. It pushes coaches to be crystal clear about why they're doing each drill and to demand quality execution.
Okay. Strategy 2, integrate recovery and education. This seems super relevant given everything we've said about burnout and injuries.
Absolutely. It's about teaching kids that recovery isn't just passive downtime. It's an active, essential part of getting better.
So what does that include?
Educating them on proper warm-ups, cool downs, effective stretching, mobility work, breathing techniques, fueling, nutrition, and the absolute necessity of good sleep.
Yeah.
These habits are just as important for their long-term development as any drill they do.
Strategy 3 is use practice to build people. I love that phrasing. It's bigger than just sports
It
skills.
really is. It means seeing every practice as a chance to coach more than just technique or tactics,
Like what?
like mindset, communication skills, making good decisions under pressure, character development, teamwork, using sport as a vehicle to help them grow into well-rounded human beings.
Fantastic. And the final strategy mentioned is partner with parents and peers. How does that collaboration help?
Well, creating that supportive triangle coach, parent, athlete, where everyone's kind of on the same page, working together for the athlete's long-term growth,
Here.
that's huge.
Yeah.
It moves away from maybe an adversarial vibe or just being overly focused on immediate results. It fosters shared understanding, emphasizes that holistic, sustainable approach, open communication, mutual support. That helps the young athlete feel valued, supported, motivated.
The article really wraps it up nicely with this thought. Athletes don't get better because they do more. They improve when their training is appropriate, adaptive, and aligned with who they are today.
That's the core.
And it stresses that the best coaches see the whole athlete, prioritizing development over just dominating the next game. And that concluding mantra is great. Do less, do it better, create exceptional experiences.
Yeah, that really nails it, doesn't it? It's a fundamental shift in thinking, away from just counting hours towards being really intentional, thoughtful, and athlete-centered in how we approach developing young people in sports.
So I guess the main takeaway here is pretty clear. For young athletes, smart training beats just more training every time.
Absolutely.
Focusing on what's right for their age, their stage, using these thoughtful methods, prioritizing quality. It's not just better for their athletic future, it's way better for their physical health, their mental well-being, and just keeping that love for the game alive.
And, it really makes you think, how might these ideas in intentionality, appropriate development, quality over quantity, how might they apply elsewhere in life, beyond just youth sports? What more is better assumptions might you be holding on to, maybe in your work or learning a new skill? Where could doing less, but doing it better, actually lead to bigger breakthroughs?
That's a really interesting question to leave folks with. Hopefully this deep dive has given you some valuable things to think about, maybe a fresh perspective on growth development, not just in sports, but maybe more broadly too. Thanks for joining us.